Hello, this is Robert Rickover at Body Learning, and today my guest is Mary Derbyshire, who's an Alexander Technique teacher of some 20 years experience who lives in Little Compton, Rhode Island. And we're going to talk today about her work with seniors and what the Alexander Technique has to offer seniors. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robert. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good talking to you. Before we begin, could you just give our listeners a short definition or description of the Alexander Technique?
Sure. The Alexander Technique is a mind-body technique that teaches you how to move better with greater ease and more freedom.
And how specifically is that of interest to seniors?
I think it's very interesting for seniors.
Mm-hmm.
As we get older, our range of motion becomes more and more limited, and we become stiff, and we don't move as well as we did as when we were younger. And because the technique teaches you how to move with greater ease, I think most seniors are thrilled to find out that they can move more easily and as a result have gained back a lot of their range of motion, which they've lost over the years.
See, when I talk to older people, they often have this assumption that, well, I'm getting old, I'm slowing down, I'm getting creaky, all the rest of it, and really that's just part of life. But you're
Right.
saying that's not necessarily the case.
No, and I think can turn the clock back.
Hmm.
And things that my students thought they would no longer be able to do, such as getting out of a chair easily. After a few lessons, they find that they can
Hmm.
independent.
Hmm. Right. And do you work with seniors in a? I mean, how if an older person came to you for a lesson, what would be the first thing that you might that might happen in that lesson?
Well, it really depends on mobility they have. For some people, getting out of a chair without a walker, for instance,
Hmm.
would seem very daunting. But after just a few minutes, they find that they actually don't need a walker to get out of the chair, and that the walker has sort of become a crutch um, because they didn't have the skill.
And by skill, what do you mean by skill?
Um, well, they feel that they don't have the coordination and that they need muscular strength to get them up and down. But the technique brings back coordination to the individual, and so that you end up moving more easily, and you realize you don't need all this muscular strength to to bring you in and out of the chair or to move you through space.
Hmm. So, I mean, they're they're using strength as a substitute for coordination, but they don't have
Correct.
enough of it.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
And when you say you're helping them would you say it's regaining coordination that they had earlier in their lives?
Absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. And they're realizing that that younger person really does live inside of them, and that they
Right.
can tap into better use and better movement and freer movement.
Hmm. So, in a sense, you're helping them uncover abilities of coordination that they had but have lost over the years.
Yes, yes.
And when they regain that, they don't necessarily need a huge amount of strength to do an
Right.
activity like standing up.
Exactly. And also, what's amazing to watch when I've been working with seniors over the years is how much confidence they gain. Because when you're in your 90s,
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes you've lost that confidence and you feel that you no longer can move freely. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so it's really remarkable working with older people.
And you work with people in their 80s and 90s?
Yes, I do. Yes, I have
Wow.
many students in their
Wow.
80s and 90s.
I think most Alexander teachers do know about George Bernard Shaw, who was
Hmm.
a famous student of Alexander's, who
Hmm.
was, I believe, 88 when he had his first Alexander lesson.
Really?
Yeah, so, but I have to say, I've never had a student in their 90s myself.
Oh, I currently have a student. He's been with me now for quite a few years, and he's approaching his 90th birthday.
Uh-huh.
And he's a remarkable man. He told me this summer that he just stopped riding his bicycle.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, and you know, you said, well, people who are older often lose confidence in their ability to move easily, perhaps because they've had a fall or someone they know has had a fall, or because I would think also because there's kind of a general expectation that they're going to be using a wheelchair or a walker or something like that. Everything's
Yes.
sort of set up to nudge
Yes.
them in that
Yes.
direction. Would you say that's the case?
That is definitely the case. And if they've had a fall, then they don't have the confidence and they've resorted to a walker or
Hmm.
a cane. They feel that is a necessity.
Hmm.
And and to teach them how to move so that they no longer need that walker, and to teach them how to regain their range of motion.
Hmm. And when you were saying earlier that you help them regain the level of coordination that they had earlier, could you say a little bit about specifically what that entails? How if I'm 90 years old and I'm used to using a walker and I come to you for a lesson, how are you going to help me regain some of that coordination specifically?
Well, I'm going to teach you how to sit and stand with ease
Hmm.
by not stiffening the muscles in your body, specifically the muscles around your neck and
Hmm.
your jaw.
Hmm.
And when you start to release these tightened muscles, you see that you can move with ease and that your tight musculature is actually impeding your your ability to move with any degree of freedom. And yes,
And it's pretty likely that I'm not going to be aware of that tight musculature,
absolutely.
even though I'm creating it, not deliberately, of course.
We're not aware of our habits.
Right. And I guess our habits have been around for a long time when we're older, and so they're more deeply entrenched. But you're saying still it's possible to learn to recognize them and undo them, the harmful
Ab-
habits.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I'm sure you would agree that a huge emphasis in Alexander teaching relates to basically the relationship between your head and your neck and your torso. That kind of sets the tone for everything else in your body. And I've certainly seen often older people, but of course plenty of younger people too, just creating a huge amount of extra tension there that they're not aware of. And I
Right.
assume
And
that's the sort of thing you help bring their awareness to and show them how to release it.
absolutely. And they and seniors can do it as well as easily as younger people.
Hmm.
It's a skill that everyone can learn, and it's not just relegated to anyone who's under 50 years old.
Hmm. And would you describe that skill that you're teaching them as primarily a mental skill?
Yes.
But it's not the
In your
kind of
mind.
it's not the kind of mental skill like doing mathematical computations or even necessarily learning a foreign language. It's a
No.
different kind of mental skill. And
It,
and
it,
and I think what you're saying is it's a kind of mental skill that doesn't necessarily diminish with age.
right.
The ability to
It's
have that skill.
yes.
Right. And
Yes.
that's a pretty powerful piece of information, I would think, for an older person, that they
But
have within them the ability to change in a useful way.
yes. The
Right.
skill of paying attention to yourself
Right.
and and how you are reacting to your environment.
Right. And I would think that older people, if they are interested in making these changes, generally have more time to experiment and think about these processes on their own than a
Hmm.
lot of younger people. Most of my students are in total overload in their lives.
Yes.
You know, their cell phones are going off. It's a real challenge for me to get them to turn their cell phones off during a lesson. And you know, they just have multiple family slash work slash whatever obligations. And older people, if they're retired or working part time or whatever, they could really afford to spend the time to do the kind of experimenting and self discovery you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. I
yeah. Um, what else would you say to a senior listening to us right now that might be of interest to them?
well, I think this whole idea that as you get older, your world shrinks, and that you're so used to saying, I can no longer do this. I can no longer do that.
Hmm.
And you think that your your world is shrinking because you're getting. And my experience has been teaching to seniors is that the Alexander technique just expands their world because once again they are able to do things that they thought they would never be able to do.
Hmm.
Simple things like going for a going for a walk down the driveway,
Hmm.
going for a walk to your mailbox, standing in the kitchen, making a loaf of bread.
Hmm.
Um, that these activities um, can be brought back into your life by studying the technique because you're going to be able to move with more freedom and and because of that you're going to have more energy and you're going to be more confident on your ability to get through your day.
Hmm. And what you say about that sort of shrinking universe that older people sense they're in, I think part of it is that they themselves are literally shrinking in the sense of pulling into themselves with all
Yes.
this excess tension.
Yes. Yes.
And if they can learn to release that and kind of really just expand into the space they're entitled to have,
And they can do that consciously. They
and
can
they
do
can do
that
that
with their
consciously.
mind.
And of course, that's the same teaching idea that is true for anybody coming for Alexander lessons. It's just that, as you say, older people may have shrunk more into themselves and created a little additional tension, but still, there's no reason why, for most people, they can't learn to release it. And for someone who's contemplating coming to you or to an Alexander teacher for lessons, say they're in their 70s or 80s,
Hmm.
what sort of investment in number of lessons would you say they're looking at to make the kind of changes that we've been talking about?
I tell most of my students to expect to have about 10 lessons.
Hmm.
And that will get them started. That will get them give them a good basic understanding of the technique.
Hmm.
And if they want to continue longer,
Hmm.
but but I think a good solid 10 lesson investment should get you on your way.
Right, and the lessons are what, 45 minutes in your case, that kind of
Yes,
time
yeah,
frame?
about 45 minutes.
Right. And so 10 lessons can get, I would agree with that totally, can get just about anybody to
Yes,
a point, senior or non-senior, to the point where they can certainly be working on their own to make ongoing
ex
improvements.
exactly.
They, yeah, go
Mhm.
ahead.
And I was going to say, and knowing that your teacher is always there if you want to come back once a month, every 6 weeks, if you'd like to have a refresher, to brush up,
Hmm.
or to ask questions to get more depth of the technique.
Right. And I'd say that's a very common pattern, not just for older students, but for students in general. They'll have a sort of a concentrated batch of lessons over, perhaps a couple of months or so, and then they may come back much less frequently after that because they're most of the work they're doing on their own at that point. And
I'd agree with
they
that.
just need to check in with their teacher, maybe get a little advice on a particular activity, that sort of thing.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to say before we come to an end?
No, I just encourage everyone to study the technique. I just it's very enjoyable, and it just opens up a whole new world on
Abs-
many levels.
yes, I totally agree with that. My guest today has been Mary Derbyshire, who teaches in Little Compton, Rhode Island. Mary, what larger city is that near?
I am about 40 minutes from Providence, Rhode Island. I'm an hour and 20 minutes from Boston.
So if you're in that area, Rhode Island, nearby Massachusetts, I'll put a link to Mary's website by the interview. You can contact her. If anything that we've been talking about intrigues you and you live somewhere else, I'll also put a link to a website that'll tell you more about the Alexander Technique and will help you find a teacher wherever in the world you happen to be. Mary, thank you so much for this.
Thank you, Robert.